Greetings, everyone. My name is Yani Arrasjid. I'm a field principal at VMware, and I'm here to talk to you about stories from the field, lessons learned from years of experience in the IT industry, from about 35 contributors to a new book on some of the tacit information that isn't always taught in a classroom environment. I'd like to thank the vBrownBag team for choosing me to participate in this session here. Quick backgrounds. I am currently at VMware. I previously worked at VMware, but in the interim, after my 12 years at VMware, I worked at VirtuStream and Dell EMC and a startup called Autometric. Over the years, I've participated in a number of the certification programs. The one I'm most well known for is probably the VCGX program. And also, I've been doing the vExpert process and participation since about 2014, 2015 timeframe. I wanted to give a little background on some of the stuff that I do. I am a field principal. I am now working in the sales side of things versus consulting. I am an inventor, having worked on a couple of different patents related to some of the VMware and Dell technology space. And I'm also an author, and that's part of what I'm going to be talking about today. The most recent book that I've worked on with several other co-authors. This here is just giving you a snapshot of my background. I won't spend too much time on there, but you're welcome to view in more detail later on. So what is the type of work that I'm doing from the book space? Well, the IT Architect series is a publishing group that Mark Gabrielski, another VCDX, and myself started a number of years ago to publish one of our first books, which is the IT Architect Series, Foundation in the Art of Infrastructure Design. This is a book on going through, assessing an environment, developing a design, developing the documentation, and developing the presentations that you would use with a customer. It's designed as a reference. It's also designed as a complementary tool to the VCDX Bootcamp book, because it can also support you in having a reference example architecture, operations guide, validation guide, and so on. That was the first book. We had a couple of other authors join us for two additional books, Damon Baer on designing risk in the IT infrastructure, Melissa Palmer, who worked on the journey on the path on becoming an architect. And then we released a book last year. This one was very interesting for me, and I took it very personal from the standpoint of I was in a moment of evacuation in between jobs. The evacuation was due to the big California fires that we had. We had about 2.5 months of evacuation, lost a lot of houses in our area. And I have a few stories related to that that'll probably be coming in our second book, which is listed on this page on the very left-hand side. That's going to be the next book that will be released later on this year. Our goal here is to have a series of books that are designed for both aspiring and experienced professionals to help them in both a reference viewpoint as well as a training and testing opportunity to make sure that you're aware of the different types of architectural, operational, and other aspects of a design and of the implementation and use. So what I want to do is give a little background on what the Stories from the Field is. This is a series within our series of books. We're on volume 1. That's currently available through lulu.com and some of the other online vendors. There's a print version and a softcover version. This particular book is addressing the question, what is it like to be engaged on an IT project when it turns into a horror story? Maybe not all stories may be considered a horror story, but when you're on a project where it goes wrong in a way that could be related to budget, working with partners or other customer team members, or dealing with other hardware or other types of challenges, how do you work through that? Many of the training classes that people go through around technology or even in academia focus on specific areas that don't always address the ways that you deal with a project the way an architect or an IT professional may have to deal with them, the different types of things that come into play when you're working with more than just one other individual or a small set of individuals. So what we've done is we've taken 35 or more. There's a few additional stories that are embedded in the editorial area that are from prominent IT professionals. Some have BCGX and other certifications. Others come from the operational side as well as project management. And I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to some of the names that are tied to the first book. Here on this particular slide, the primary editors are Matthew Wood, who worked with me on several other books, including the vCloud Architecture Toolkit, which goes back a few years. I was able to get him to come and join on this set of projects. I am also working on editorial work as well. Both Matt and myself are contributing, along with the other people that are listed, on creating stories for this particular book. What I'd like to do next is kind of give you a little background on what we're including in the book. So we have a number of stories. As I said, there are a little bit more than 35. And in each story, we provide the title with a set of story codes. The story codes provide insight into the topic areas that are covered. So if you have a particular interest in stories related to dealing with BCDR, security, or other areas, you can quickly find the stories that are most relevant. We talk about the project in the story. We talk about what happened, what was the failure or the issue that came up, how was the customer impacted by this failure, what could be done differently, and finally, lessons learned. What has the individual who provided the story learned from this session, and what would they do differently based on the project outcomes? What I would like to do is give you a little bit more detail on one example story. But first, before I do that, let's talk about a few other areas. One, what are the story codes and what are some of the examples? As I said, these are to help identify stories so there you can find relevant stories to the circumstance that you're dealing with. Each story does have a primary code that's highlighted, so you'll find only one of those highlighted. That's, again, the primary code of focus, but there are typically more than one area that will provide benefit to you. So here are some examples. These are just 5 examples out of about 26 total from the first book for areas that cover financial, analytics, requirements, constraints, assumptions, sales, as well as security. And in each of these areas, we follow the same guideline of the construct, and each story includes roughly 6 to 8 pages of content. So I'm going to give you 4 example abstracts to give you a little bit of a background, and then I'm going to go into the first one with a little bit more detail. So the first one is location, location, location. You know, you've got water or other types of liquids. What happens when that comes into play in a data center? It's usually not good if an accident happens and you have a bad mix. And in this particular story, we talk about how the consultant was engaged, what were some of the issues that came up, what were some of the outcomes, and in this particular story, there was something that needed to be done before they even got to the consulting engagement, where the risk management identified they made some poor choices in where a recreation center was in relation to their data center. And you'll see that in just a minute. The second story is Murphy's Law on data center migration. This is where lack of planning can result into some huge challenges. Things like assessment of the workloads, the resource requirements, application dependencies, and all of that come into play on the application side. And then there's the infrastructure elements. Are things different? Are they similar? This story is based before we had the opportunity to use HCX as an example for data center migration, but it includes some of the elements that you'll find that have to be addressed and where the planning aspects were missed and how that could have been corrected for a future engagement. The next one is on what is mission critical. In this particular area, it's covering when an issue happens because an understanding of the mission critical apps versus other apps is not fully identified. The assessment hasn't been done correctly, and some of the planning hasn't been done correctly in that case. And the final example I have is one that we're hearing a lot about in the news recently. This is on ransomware recovery. What do you do if you run into the situation where you are a victim of a ransomware attack? What do you do if you choose to try to avoid payment of that ransomware? And how would you actually do a recovery to get to a state that's considered stable if the opportunity is available? So the first example story that I mentioned was location, location, location. Here I want to kind of give you an example of what it looks like to see the different topic areas. So the risk area is the one that was the highest focus on this particular story. And what we do in the story, and again, this is a shortened version of the 8 pages. These are just short 1 or 2 liners. The project was to review and provide recommendations for disaster preparedness for a new data center. The data center had been retrofitted from an older building. They kept the data center on the first floor, and they had a recreation center on the second floor, which included a swimming pool. Between those 2 floors, above the data center equipment, were pipes. These included clean water, they also included gray water, and they also included sewage lines. And this is a situation I've run into with other customers as well. In some cases, they were able to prevent a disaster from happening. And in other situations, they ran into what we would call an OSHA situation, where one of the gray water or black water pipes had a failure. In this particular case, it was the middle of winter in a northern part of the U.S., where there was a power outage. The generator and the UPS systems did not provide coverage for the entire time of the duration. Because of this, the pipes in the building froze, and in many cases, they cracked, including the ones that were over the data center. Once the team came back, they identified what was going on. The power had restored itself, but because the pipes had already cracked, they had burst and they had leakage into the data center where there was flooding. In this particular case, we had the issue of millions of dollars of lost equipment, days or weeks for some people of lost productivity, and then, of course, the life safety risk where you mix electricity, water, sewage. There's a lot of bad things that can happen in that situation. Now, what could have been differently? Well, relocation of the pipes would have been good. That would have to have been done before the situation happened. Unfortunately, for the consultant that worked on this, they were brought in after the fact. And during their engagement, this was one of the things that actually happened and was not solvable once the disaster occurred. So what did the consultant learn? In this case, multiple options could have been taken before the use of the data center. This could include things like relocation of the pipes, relocation of the data center, additional guarding, things like shielding for the data center equipment. So there's 5 options that were produced in this particular example. This here, again, is a high level, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a context of what a story might look like and some of the elements within that story. Now, I wanted to call out one other area that I find very interesting. I have a good friend who happens to be in the art world as an artist for many, many musicians. I met him through a Kickstarter project. We become good friends, and I said, "Hey, we're working on this project, and I am looking for a couple of people to participate. And one of them is based on your artwork. Would you be game to work with us on the cover art?" And as you can see from my previous slides and from this picture on the left-hand side, this is the cover that he came up with for the first book. Meaning, we have 2 individuals here. We want to take a look at something, a problem that maybe we don't have a lot of information about, and we want to experience the journey that was taken by the people who are conveying the stories. Our second book cover has already been produced. The book will be coming out later on this year, and that includes some additional artwork to show that now that they're in the middle of the unknown, they're starting to understand and reveal some of the things that can help them be more successful. And in our particular case, in our stories, we typically will have more than one recommendation in each story. Again, we cover many topic areas. They can include people, process, technology, relationships, costing, and things like that. And I thought that it would be really good to bring in somebody who's recognized from the art world, who also is a musician, so to speak, in that he supports musicians based on my interest and my background from my participation in Elastic Sky and the hypervisors from the VMware side in the past. One of the things that I would like to have you think about is some of these calls to action that I've placed. The first one is look at these stories and see how they can benefit you through the experiences shared. Literally, if we look collectively at the 35 plus authors every one of them has anywhere from 10 to 30 years of experience. Therefore, we've got a few hundred years of collective experience in the field. But the more important aspect is it's the tacit information, the information that is in the head of the consultants or the architects or the project managers that participated, that is not something that you typically find in a classroom environment or a technology training session. The second thing I would say is you also will have tacit knowledge based on your experience. You likely will have had both successes and failures. And for all of us, if we learn from the failures that we've made, we hopefully can prevent them from the future. And by sharing with others, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping others in this space. Teaching in many ways is a great way to learn about other people's experiences as well. And I think the shared experiences is one way to actually drive the effort forward. The third thing that I wanted to do as a call to action is we are in the process of book 2. We have a few slots that are left. I'd like to propose that if you are interested, reach out to me. I am on Twitter as @VCDX001. And you can also reach me through the vBrownBag and also through LinkedIn. But the idea here is we are adding on additional stories for the book 2 that will come out later this year. And also we're lining up contributors for the 3rd volume, which will be the final volume in the series for next year. And what I'd like to say right now is basically this here is the tail end of my session. And as I said before, please feel free to reach out to me. My connection is down here on Twitter at VCDX001, or you can reach me through LinkedIn. Happy to follow up with you on any additional questions you have. And especially if you are interested in participating in the stories, please let me know and I can provide you more information. Thank you.